Welcome to the Job Shop Show, where we talk with the owners, suppliers, partners, and customers of custom manufacturers. Listen and learn the secrets of top-performing job shops, the tools, techniques, and backgrounds that have made them successful, all in the quest of raising the bar for custom manufacturing. I'm your host, Jay Jacobs. This episode is sponsored by Paperless Parts, connecting buyers and suppliers of custom manufactured parts. The Paperless Platform is a secure, ITAR-compliant, cloud-based manufacturing system for suppliers that reduces the amount of time spent on sales, estimating, quoting, administration, and order processing. It offers seamless integration with the accounting and ERP software tools that shops already use, such as QuickBooks, E2, and JobBoss. Paperless Parts was founded with a mission to make manufacturing more accessible by streamlining the quote-to-cash process. Spend less time quoting and more time selling.
This episode is sponsored by our friends at the NTMA, the National Tooling and Machining Association. The NTMA is an association of privately held, entrepreneurial-based, and family-owned businesses, representing nearly 1,200 small to mid-sized machine shops and tool and die shops across the country. They have approximately 30 very active regional chapters that host local events, run apprenticeship programs, and provide other services to their regional members. As an association of peers, the goal of the NTMA is to help members of the U.S. precision custom manufacturing industry achieve profitable growth and business success in a global economy through networking, workforce development and training, technology, best practices education, advocacy, programs, and services with industry partners. To learn how your company can get involved with the NTMA, including how to join, visit ntma.org.
Shazam! This is Jay Jacobs. Welcome to the Job Shop Show. Looking back, one of the competitive advantages I had when I started Rapid at the age of 37 was that this was my first major business. It blinded me to the reality of how hard it is to actually start and run a job shop. You don't get discouraged with setbacks because you don't know they're setbacks. Today's guest, Andy Reinwald of Ripley Machine and Tool, is an under 30 owner of a job shop that he purchased from his grandfather in 2015. And he was only introduced to manufacturing in 2010. We're going to chat with him about what he's done since taking over the shop, why and how he is focused on a low-budget digital approach to sales and marketing, and the different ways he acquires knowledge that he has not yet had the experience to live through. In the short time Andy's been a shop owner, Ripley Machine and Tool has seen tremendous sales growth and been recognized as a modern machine shop top shop in 2018. And Andy himself has been singled out as an emerging leader by the Production Machining in 2019 and a 30 under 30 emerging leader by our friends, the National Tooling and Machining Association. A lot of accomplishments already. Welcome to the Job Shop Show, Andy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jay.
Yeah, glad you're here. Well, the snow is probably gone from upstate New York where you're located, although I know that it can sometimes come late in the season there. That area is also hockey country. Did you play hockey growing up?
No, I actually didn't, but we never had it in school or anything, but I definitely followed it a lot.
Yeah, you're a hockey fan?
Yep.
Excellent. Which team do you follow?
I'm actually a Penguins fan, but I mean, being that I'm only about an hour from Buffalo, I, definitely don't mind the Sabres and go to more Sabres games than I do Penguins games.
Sure. So to get started, maybe you could tell us a little bit about Ripley Machine and Tool. What are you guys special in? What do we need to know about you?
Well, Ripley Machine and Tool was started in the 50s as a different company. And in 1994, my grandfather purchased the company. From there, he kind of grew it pretty well, up until really the 2008, 2009 crash. And from there, he just kind of started looking into succession plans. And 2015, we worked out an agreement for me to purchase the company from him. And I've been the owner since then. Our primary line of work is really production, CNC, turning, specifically in the valve industry.
Mm-hmm.
We also specialize in grinding as really an outside service for other shops, specifically internal and centerless grinding. We have other support equipment as well, including CNC milling, 3-axis fashion.
How many folks and size of the shop?
We're about 15 to 20, depending on how you count employees. We're about 15,000 square foot.
Gotcha. And how did you get involved with the shop? Were you recruited by your grandfather?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I had always worked here. Actually, I set up some of my grandfather's Excel spreadsheets through my elementary and middle school days. He was amazed at what such a young kid could do, and I said, "Grandpa, this is just common knowledge for all of us millennials, quote unquote."
Yeah, yeah.
But then 2010, as kind of the summer or as the school year wound down, Grandpa kept bugging me about if I wanted to work during the summer. And I said, well, I'm doing some other stuff, but I don't really have a true summer job. And at that point in time, there wasn't a lot of readily available jobs due to the kind of being at the tail end of the recession. So I came to work at the shop, ran a lathe, ran a valve component on indexing fixture, and pretty much put a part in and pulled it out and hoped it was right. I learned how to check it, but there wasn't much to it. And truthfully, didn't really like that. But after
Why not?
What's that?
Why didn't you like that?
There wasn't. It was a kind of a mindless task, truth be told. A couple offsets throughout the course of the day, but really just staring at a machine running was the basis of it. So
Did he allow music in the shop and cell phones? I don't know if cell phones were around. Certainly they were around, but where the folks were using them as a music player, things like that.
Well, music wasn't allowed. We still don't necessarily allow it in the shop.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phones at that point in time were kind of not very prevalent. There's probably a couple of us that had smartphones, but really, some people might have had the old T9 cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
but they really wasn't so yeah, there wasn't much to do while the machine ran either.
Yeah, you just stared. Yes.
Yeah.
I did that for a summer job. I had to take parts on and off of a lathe and then use an X-Acto knife to do some deburring.
Yeah. And if I still remember the cycle time of 5 minutes and 40 seconds, and I had figured out how I could get that part in and out of there in 20 seconds, so I could run 10 an hour for 8 hours a day and get 80 done in a day. But
yeah. Then you have a lot of downtime in between.
Yeah, exactly. But thankfully, after my senior year of high school, I came back to work again, kind of didn't really have any better options. And that's when I started to be able to, started to work on manual mills some more and doing just some blueprint reading and doing some basic stuff that I found to be very enjoyable of actually machine shop projects. And that's when I started to really kind of get a lot more interested in working at the shop.
When you took over, we were chatting before, and you're like a lot of shops, your customers are typically within an hour or two of the shop, but you have customers today who are 5 to 6 hours away who they were close to you, but those companies were bought by other companies and then they moved the business away, but you've retained the business. So how that's unusual. Why do you think you still have the business even though the distance has increased and there's a lot of shops between you and the customers right now?
Well, I think the big thing for us is communication. I'm a type of person, I like to just hop in the vehicle and drive, go down and meet the customer. Obviously can't do that right now, but just the communication is key to, and then obviously if you're communicating and making sure that you keep receiving orders and then working with the customer to ensure that you're delivering a high quality part, you're making sure you're communicating as to where you stand for price levels. We've actually seen where customers that we were onboarded with as a part of an acquisition, we've actually started to pick up lines of work inside of their already existent product line.
You've used the word communication, but What does that mean to you when you say you've got to communicate effectively?
Well, just trying to make sure that you're staying on top of updating where you stand with orders, where your pricing is, why, if you quote a certain way, why you're quoting like that, because what might have worked with the previous company might not work with the new ownership. They might be not really in tune with the way that you're doing things. So trying to know what works best for them, however that method of communication might be.
Do you have a standard of how quickly you have to reply to emails or voice messages?
I don't have necessarily a standard, but I have my email on my phone, and I even will find myself checking it in the evenings. I'm typically here 90 hours a week anyways, so,
Whoa.
but I try to make sure that even if somebody emails in the evening about something or on a weekend, that, at least the very least, you get back to them. And I also, in this day and age, I really am not afraid to give out my cell phone and encourage people to shoot you a text, shoot you a picture of something. And it's really a great tool. As much as we might speak negatively, as shop owners might speak negatively about the cell phones, they really can be a great tool as well.
That's a good point, because some people are afraid to give out their cell phones. Do you get a lot of text, or is it calls on your cell phone?
Actually, a lot more text, just because of the convenience that you can, hey, how are we coming along on this certain project? And it's quick that he might
Right.
be walking through his facility and see some parts that are waiting to go into assembly, that they're waiting for parts from us. And it's just a quick text, and I can get back to him whenever, and we don't forget to email back and forth. It's very convenient.
Do you see how the cell phones are used in texting with your customers? Is there an age preference? What I'm getting towards, do the younger end of the spectrum with your customers use the texting more than older ones, or is it uniform? How do you see that?
I definitely see it being a younger thing, but I think it's starting to really become more prevalent across all age groups. I've got people I deal with in their 70s that are texting me all the time. They text me more than I'm like, this is a phone call, not a text.
Do you have a landline, obviously, in the shop?
Yes.
Do you have voicemail on that, or is that picked up all the time, or do you have an automated system?
We have just an old school phone. I find that a couple of our local customers will call, but they've got my cell phone and email that if they can't get in. We do have a voicemail, but it's not a high top priority for us. It's not really I've thought about trying to forward the phone calls from the shop to my cell phone, but I'm not technologically advanced enough to do that.
Are the customers talking with other folks within your shop too, or communicating with other folks in your shop, or is it primarily just you?
Typically with me, if I'm not around, they know who to speak with if they need an answer, but typically it runs through me.
Do the other folks in your shop, or even, I guess, internally, are you using texting as a way to be less formal than email and have that immediate ability to answer questions? Is that something you encourage within your shop?
Absolutely. Like I said, it's sometimes we definitely get bugged by how much time people spend on their cell phones in general, not just at work, but the ability to just text it somebody, hey, this priority or this part just became a priority, or tooling is something that really is like a big reason for texting, that you can be able to pass. We even have group messages with our vendors and our employees to be able to kind of discuss what we need for tooling, or what what the project we're looking at is going to require. So the texting across our shop floor and to our vendors and our customers is just working very well for us.
What would you say to a shop owner who is afraid of allowing texting like that? What is a better way to think about it from a positive standpoint, or how do you get over? I'm sure you've had some misuse of it. How do you get over those things, and even that fear of having the texting being so widely used in the shop?
Well, it really depends on what your current policy is. For us, we never had a true form or true cell phone policy in place when they started to really become very popular.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it was like, okay, basically we're kind of unwritten rule that, it's convenient for us, but, and you're going to lose some time, but that time that probably was spent texting was probably spent reading the newspaper 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So you do lose some of that, and you've got to monitor that. But the advantages of if you don't have
yeah, that's a great point, because let's say that you get an answer in 30 seconds from someone because you're able to text, but in the past that might have involved 1 or 2 trips to find somebody face to face, and then you've got all the pleasantries. How you doing, Andy? Oh, good, Jay. What's going on? Whereas a text just gets to the point. So I'm just thinking you could look at it as a 30-second text replaces a 5-minute interaction. So as much as you don't want them goofing off on their cell phone, if you, in a sense, lost 2 minutes to goofing off, then you're still ahead from a time perspective.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and when we've had internal conversations about the cell phones, I kind of bring myself back to it a lot of times, that I think it saves me more time personally than all total the shop loses because of them, and that's kind of where I'm like, I guess it's kind of a necessary evil.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously I know there's ERP systems out there and whatnot that probably, if adapted properly, could replace the communication that we're currently discussing. But for the time being, the ability to just text pictures and all that inside of our shop floor saves a lot of time for us.
Cool. One of the things that it seemed to me is that when you bought the shop from your grandfather, it wasn't what I'll call a modern machine shop. You have worked and are still working to bring it into the 21st century. And I think of somebody who is buying a shop that hasn't had a lot of investments made in the past few years to it, or perhaps you're a new generation taking over a shop like yourself, and now you have to think about, okay, the long term, we can't do everything at once, but we want to modernize the shop. So in the beginning, did you write a business plan? How'd you go about that when you knew you were going to be the owner?
No, I didn't. I was 21 at the time, and I was kind of already running operations on a daily basis and had a very good understanding for everything that was going on. So for the first year of my ownership, I kind of was like, all right, we'll just go with the flow. And as the first year started to progress, we were still continuing our year by year downward trend for sales. I started to panic, and it was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to lay off people. And well, I'd done that as a vice president before. I'd never done that as an owner. And that was very stressful.
So did you deliberately just sort of go with the flow, or did you that you were just trying to become an owner now, and adding on things just would have created a complexity that you weren't ready for? I'm just trying to understand what, as a new owner, how you went about it, and what was the triggers. Well, you're talking about the trigger was the potential layoffs.
Well, when I said go with the flow, I probably failed to mention we actually did invest in a couple new twin turret or twin spindle lathes, live tooling, which was like the best machines that this shop had ever had, right after I purchased the company. But we kind of bought them as a means to be like, okay, cool, we can speed up the cycle times a little bit on the parts we're doing and save costs. But you and I both know the cost of those machines. It takes a lot of just saving some time to you've got to really add work.
Yeah, but this gets into what I'm thinking is that something that perhaps your grandfather knew was a good investment, but he just at his age didn't want to make any investments like that, and you were just chomping at the bit, ready to go? And what were you thinking? When did you start thinking about that?
Yeah, that was definitely something that was really, and that's an area we were flawed in when I took over, because my grandfather was very, very early to bring CNCs in, and he was very frequently purchasing new machinery.
Oh,
In 2008, he had added 5 new machines, brand new CNC machines, including the previously mentioned indexing fixture that I ran. And he had put on a brand new addition. And that then kind of that basically they opened that up, and just as everything was going downhill, I always remember him saying is, I had a couple, or I opened the building, went in, had knee surgery, came back to work to lay off people, and went home and recovered. That was kind of basically all within a 2-week period for him, and really trying to recover from that. We only purchased 1 new CNC machine from 2000, after 2008 to the time I took over, and that was just to replace a machine that was done.
okay. So he was investing up to the point of the recession in 2008 and 9.
Yeah, and his age was, he didn't truly know what the plan was going forward, so there was a big pause in spending, and trying to catch up from that was definitely became a priority as soon as we knew the business was going to keep on keeping on. So that's why we brought in the 2 machines originally. But to go back to your original question, we just kind of let those machines just carry on, and just doing what we were doing, following our processes, really nothing new.
Were there any, if you're looking back, any intentional things that you changed in year 1 or outside of adding the equipment?
We started to work towards ISO compliance, again, ISO registration. We started that in the middle of 2015, I believe, but it was kind of a slow process, making some minor changes, but really just kind of, at that point in time, we were just kind of shooting just to meet the requirements, do what we had to do, and just to get that rubber stamp of approval.
Why did you think ISO was important?
I don't really remember exactly why. It was somewhere in a conversation, somebody had asked me if, I think when trying to acquire new work, we'd been asked if we were ISO certified, and I, after hearing that a couple times, I kind of thought it would be necessary to get ISO certified.
Gotcha. The purpose behind what you do is important to you. We were chatting about that before the podcast started. When did you really start thinking about purpose? Was it there on day 1? And maybe you can just tell me a little bit more about what your purpose is besides making parts.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it was there on day 1. I mean, I really, for me, I won't lie, it just wasn't. I mean, I worked hard, but it wasn't the drive inside of me was just to work. It wasn't really to the big picture like I feel like I have now. As we started to go through 2015, and 2015 kind of was the continuation of the downward sales trend that we were having before I took over the business. And in 2016 was and still is actually the worst year we've ever had, including through 2008, 2009. As it started to go through that year, and it really was hard on me to have the stress of honestly trying to stay open. And kind of as that year progressed, I started to reshift my focus and really have a true faith in God, and his plans for whatever was to come out of it. And I just remember specifically in 2016, one week, not necessarily having a plan as to how I was going to make payroll at the end of the week. Just kind of saying, well, God, it's in your hands. I don't know. We'll figure out something. And lo and behold, I looked down on the desk, and there's an IRA statement, just out of the blue monthly statement, that I had enough money to make payroll after I paid the fees And sure enough, we made payroll, and that was kind of a, so really just my faith in God drives me. And that's from there, we started really turning things around. We started focusing more on improving, and I mentioned the ISO and how we were just doing it for the rubber stamp. And we started to look as to what you can get out of a true quality management system and how that can benefit your business. And as we started to do all those things, it's really kind of just led us to where we are now, and hopefully continues the upward trend of, and not just in sales, but just in terms of just general attitude from the company and the difference that we're making in our employees and our community everywhere.
So supporting the community is part of your purpose?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was always a big focus of my grandfather's was charity. He did a lot to help other people out. And as watching him and admiring him in that regard, that's something that I really carried on and really want to do. And while we don't necessarily have a certain number, a significant percent of profits at our business do go back into specifically local charities to make a difference.
That's great. That's really commend you for that. And how do you support your employees? Are there times where you go above and beyond being I guess what's required as an employer?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I take that, and that's somewhere where I felt that even in the last few months, my grandfather passed away in September, and just kind of at that point in time, that was I think a big turning point in my life. And being able to, I just remember being out with a friend and being asked, what is Ripley Machine about? And I struggled to answer that question. Obviously I could give her the mechanical knowledge or the mechanical of this is what we make, blah, blah, blah. No one's going to understand that. But that question just resonated with me. And for me, I really want to see that we're not just our employees aren't just coming to work to collect a paycheck, that they're coming here, that they, are able to be, well off or decently well off outside of work, and that they've got a purpose outside of work.
And that, yes, then it's definitely more than a job. And sorry you lost your grandfather there. That seems though his spirit's living on in you.
Yeah, it was a difficult time, but he was sick for a few weeks, and the last week of being able to just spend a lot of evenings with him, just talking about work, about faith in God and those types of things, truly made a huge difference for me in my life.
The turnaround happened in 2016 was a worst year that you had. What was the catalyst? How did you change the way you were thinking and make Ripley start growing?
Really, I mean, we obviously definitely caught some breaks, that it became a lot better business, especially manufacturing business climate in that time frame. But we just continued we just kind of kept like, okay, new project, through various means of even our current customers and then new customers. And just, it was like a slow or a big truck getting rolling that it's like kept just kind of growing and growing and growing. And it turned into a very busy and chaotic year in 2017.
Were you the project manager, sales contact point? Were there other folks significantly involved in bringing new customers in, or was that what you saw as your responsibility as the owner?
That's something that as a small shop, I've always taken full responsibility, and is trying to drum up new business in whatever means necessary.
And what percent roughly did sales increase in 2017 over 16?
We were over 100% increase.
and the shop was able to handle that increased workload? Did you have to make any changes or adjustments?
We made some hires, and obviously we made some significant increases in hourly or hours
Mm-hmm.
worked. But I'm really proud of my guys and the way we handled it. And the big part is that we didn't lose anybody through the downturn in 2016. And that was a lesson my grandfather taught me, as he did the same thing from 2008, 2009, being able
Mm-hmm.
to keep your workforce together so that way when the water spigot gets turned back on, you're ready to go.
How did you do that? Were people working less than 40-hour weeks, or did some people get furloughed?
Yeah,
What?
we definitely had, I know at one point in time we utilized the shared work plan, and we laid off, but we tried to work with our employees to ensure that the core group of people were staying working, and we tried to focus that was a key expense for us. We pushed a lot of other expenses down the road through
Yep.
various methods, and we just focused on our employees, because that's a key asset for us.
Yeah. I remember in January of 2009, when you didn't know what was going to happen, and business is always slow for prototyping in that time frame. That was our worst downturn during the recession, and we made the decision not to lay folks off and bite the bullet as a group. So we went down to 32-hour weeks and told the folks, I don't know how long this is going to last, but this is, if you can't survive on that, I understand, but this is what I want to do. And we did that for 2 weeks, and then the business started coming back, and we were able to bring people back to 40 hours and no overtime, and then eventually bring the overtime back. But I thought it made sense a lot. Sounds like a lot like what you were doing to keep the group intact, because manufacturing's cyclical. It's going to come back.
Yeah, that's exactly, like I said, that was the lesson I took away from 2008, 2009, and was able to apply it to 2016. And it just that knowledge that your crew has, it's worth a lot.
Right now, I want to get back to the growth, but right now I'm thinking, you mentioned earlier you're working 90 hours a week, and you have a good reputation for a shop. You've got to be doing the right sort of things. If you have customers who have been acquired and businesses being purchased from afar, and they're giving you more work. So you're going to keep growing, but it's going to be tough to improve upon 90 hours a week. What do you, what's your plan in how the shop will grow so that you don't have to continually work 90 hours a week? And when you get to the point where you can't just open the door of the shop and shout out, hey, make the parts like last time, but make sure you knock the edge off that radius. It's not on the print, but we got to do it. How do you think about that transition, or is that even on the radar?
No, that's a great question, and it's something that I've struggled with. Right now, obviously, at this point in time, it's kind of when people say, "Oh, you're working a lot of hours. What else is there to do?" But
Right.
hopefully, as this crisis hopefully starts to come to an end, and we get back to somewhat life as normal, that's definitely something that for me, I've known that. Well, I never want to be a hands-off owner. Obviously, the extreme hours that I put in, ideally, I start to be able to put that time towards a home and potentially a wife and kids and all those great things, and doing more in the community and doing more in all of those for myself. But so that's definitely a priority of mine, and we're kind of the same way we talked earlier about just kind of a little bit at a time. We're trying to figure out ways that we can improve for the time being, to eliminate the need to run in here and ask me a question, or potentially run up to our foreman or another we're trying to get that tribal knowledge. We want that expanded out to all of our workers whenever possible. I think that was.
I just had a question for you. You mentioned the term tribal knowledge. When you talk about that in your shop, do people get that phrase?
They don't understand exactly what I say, probably when I say tribal knowledge, but as soon as I start to explain it, they're like, oh yeah.
Where did you pick that up?
I actually picked it up from our ISO auditor. He had asked me a question at one point in time, and I said, well, he said, well, how do you know this? And I said, well, pretty much the entire shop just knows it. And he said, oh, tribal knowledge. And he kept saying it a couple more times, and I wrote it down. I always enjoy those conversations you have, because our particular auditor, he's very wise, and so great guy to learn from. But I actually picked it up from him, and lo and behold, it was in the 2015 standard as organizational knowledge. But so
organization, okay. So tribal knowledge is slang for organizational knowledge. Gotcha. So you're going to make that transition and just taking it piece by piece?
Yeah. For me right now, I think the big thing we see in our future at some point in time is a more advanced ERP system.
Are you using one now?
We're using a very, very old one, which is we use for creating job travelers. And other than that, we've actually basically outdated it. But we're working with that system right now to just incorporate certain things that it's like, basically what I've told a lot of my guys is, when you have to go ask somebody some question, whatever it might be, think to yourself, how do we prevent that question from having to be asked, even if it's not by yourself again, but by somebody else? And we're trying to implement that into our work travelers, so that way that information is readily available. So that way, if one person has to ask it, or if one time we run into a problem, it's laid out for everybody to know down the road. So that way we don't have that, hey, only so-and-so knows how to do this.
So we at Rapid, we would encourage folks to write notes on the travelers, and when they came back in, we attempted to put all the notes into the traveler, into the work orders, so that the next time the job ran, they would be captured. We weren't always so successful in that. I'm just curious, is that how you're doing it, and how successful are you in? It's sort of it depends sort of by person is what we saw.
Yeah, that's what we find. And sometimes it's one of those, like, it's tough as an owner, because it's like you want the employees to do that and to take that time to make those notes and do all that. But all of a sudden, when they're getting done with a setup and the customer's screaming for their parts, and you're sitting there watching them do something, instead of going on to the next setup, they're writing notes. It's tough to have patience regarding, and it's tough to just get guys to keep doing that. But we're pretty much following that same, put the note on a router. We actually have a form that they can fill out as well. And we were really struggling with that. And now we've actually incorporated that whole thing into our quality objectives for our quality management system. And we're starting to get a little bit more progress. And we've got a cool initiative starting in the month of May, where we're going to kind of make some challenges on who can turn in the most of those types of notes, changes, improvements, whatever they might be, to just try to drive that nail home, that we want the guys to be doing that to better our process down the road.
You mentioned you're making it part of your quality management. Is that a particular tool, or just part of the process of your quality management?
Well, what we did is, as I kind of soul searched late last year, we actually implemented continuous improvements into our quality objectives. And we're utilizing all these things. We're recording them as a continuous improvement, because that's what we want. In order to have, we don't want continuous improvement to be something that 2 or 3 people at the top of the line are doing. We want everybody, all 18, 19, 20 employees, to be doing every single day.
So I want to get in the nitty gritty. How do you capture those? Are there specific software tools, or you mentioned a form? How does that process look?
Well, we're following the process of basically as things come in, we enter them into our ERP, so that way they're on the travelers the next time we create a job packet for that particular job. Now, actually, all we've only done is just add an Excel spreadsheet that we're recording it with a bunch of different functions and macros to keep track of who's done what. But nothing too fancy, I guess.
Is that a homegrown spreadsheet?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Gotcha. And when did you get your ISO certification?
We were certified in September of 2016.
You think it's paid benefits for you beyond the fact that you can tell customers you're ISO certified?
Oh, absolutely. The first year where, like I said, we were just going with the flow of what was required of us. It paid benefits numerous times, just the things that we did because we kind of had to. Now that we've really embraced, and I love the 2015 standard. I love so many aspects that they added into that. But embracing that standard and really utilizing it to how you're running your business is so beneficial. Specifically, the continuous improvement and the organizational knowledge, both of those things are a big part of each of those. And we're trying to utilize those to our advantage.
Yeah, that makes sense. You also bought Mastercam, I think it was last year, and you're using that now to program part.
Yes, we late last year in December we invested in Mastercam and training. Actually, we spent a lot of time in training for our guys, so that way they were well versed on it. And
Are you one of the programmers as well?
I'm not. I know enough to get myself in trouble on there. I'll get in if I get a solid file from a customer. I know enough to get around and it's not pretty, but I don't try to be doing any tool paths or anything on there yet. One of these days I'm gonna either go to school or else make my guys teach me how to do all the ins and outs of Mastercam. But
how did you program before that?
Pretty much a lot of what we did was either on our lathes, we were strictly conversational. The mills, we were using just a lot of pre-written code and then applying them as necessary to the parts that we were running, modifying as needed and or just writing programs out by hand.
What made you decide to buy Mastercam then?
Truthfully, I was actually it all started looking at a new mill, and it was a 5-axis and it was a good deal. And I kind of was thinking about pulling the trigger, and I got back and I thought, boy, we don't have a way to program that. And we don't have a way to really truly inspect with that. I said, well, I guess we can't put the cart in front of the horse. So then I started thinking about programming software as kind of being our next step. And I started looking at all around the shop at kind of all the things where we could utilize that programming software. And it became a no-brainer at the time. And then we were kind of had a month off, I guess you could say, in December where we didn't really have a lot of work. So it was a good opportunity to kind of utilize that breather to train our guys and start to implement the Mastercam.
What was the reaction in the shop? Were they excited to have Mastercam in? Was there resistance?
No, they were very excited. Everybody, the individuals that I talked about training, they were very excited, and the rest of the shop knew that it was just another step forward for our shop.
Was it a group decision to buy Mastercam?
I ran it by, I kind of asked the opinions of the guys that were actually going to be doing the programming. And I said, what do you guys think? And they were on board and were excited. And we got talking about, where they could use it. So then I brought them into the meeting and kind of said, you're going to sit and listen to the sales pitch. And I'm not going to interrupt. I might be here, but I'm not here to, I want you guys to tell me what you think if it'll work. And they were spoke very positively of it and thought it would work. And that was, so then, from there, I obviously pulled the trigger and went down that route.
Great. Any other big things you've done I want to get into the digital sales and marketing in a sec, but in the shop, are there any other big things you've done in the last 5 years?
Well, the biggest probably thing for us that we've done in the last 5 years is we got into the work of Swiss turn. Last February, we bought a Tsugami just a basic Tsugami 5-axis lathe, but it completely new line of work. We'd never done Swiss work before, so.
And that's been well received?
Oh yeah, that was that was a great investment for our shop.
Were you able to take existing work that you were doing on other type of equipment and put it there?
Yeah, we had a couple jobs that when we were initially exploring the purchase of the Swiss, that we worked with the Morris Great Lakes and kind of to do a couple time studies on a few jobs that we were doing on a lathe. And the big thing about those is that they either had secondary operations or they had operations on a sub spindle that were taking away from time that the main spindle was actually machining on the part. So we knew going into that we would be saving a lot of time and a lot of handling, just getting a finished part coming off the machine most of the time. So we had a few jobs that were specifically earmarked for that machine. But as we quickly found out that it's like, well, when you cut that time, it eats through the backlog really quick. So then we were able to start to get into a lot of parts that we never would have been able to do before. And we've had great luck with it. Just it's still a learning curve. There's just so much to it. But it's definitely a staple in our business going forward, and I look forward to the opportunity for the next axis or multiple axes or whatever that might hold for the next machine that we will hopefully someday and then be purchasing.
Well, that's a great segue into the sales and marketing discussion that I wanted to chat with you about, because 2016, not a good year, and you cranked up the sales and marketing. You have a particular flavor in how you did it, and you're a small shop, so you didn't have a lot of money. What did you do, or what things did you do that worked, and what maybe didn't work so much?
One of the first things that we really did is we kind of went to our existing customers and discussed with them like areas of work that, hey, why aren't we getting more work? What can we do to get more work? And sometimes, those conversations like, well, you got to cut your prices or something that was just like this, it might not happen. But
Right.
Other times we found it's like, oh, well, we can work with you on that, or we can do that. One particular customer, we actually, in discussion, they were paying a lot of our competition was actually foreign. And then also some of the domestic competition was halfway across the country or wherever. So we kept talking and talking. I said, the simple solution was, well, how about I quote you a delivered price? Because it didn't make the poor purchasing agent was having to calculate out 15 different quotes and then factor in shipping on all of this. And so we just started with a lot of talking to our current customers, how we could better serve them, what they needed, how we could get more work from them. And then we started to focus on trying to find new customers.
Wait, before we get to the new customers, so there's two things that I'm hearing there is, number one, you did something, I'm sure you were always talking to customers, but it sounds like you had more substantial conversations.
Yeah, we really tried to have, and I specifically several of them face-to-face conversations in their facility a lot of times. So I'd say, hey, what's that part? Why are we not making that for you? We can make that.
So and you had never done that before?
I had, but not to that extent.
Okay, so this is great. This is basic sales 101, but it worked, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot of learning on the fly. And honestly, a lot of times it was like, well, you want to quote it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Here you go.
I love it. That's what I mean by sales 101, because you have to ask for the RFQ, you ask for the order. The other thing that I like is you said, let me quote you a delivered price, and that's did did they start asking the foreign competition to quote a delivered price as well, as opposed to having to figure it out? Because that's a great way to make your competitors work harder and do things they may not want to do, but it gives that buyer that apple and apple comparison.
I don't think they ever actually did, but I think a lot that definitely was like okay, like if it's somewhat near on pricing, we'll just go with Ripley machine because we know we don't have to factor in shipping.
Right.
And so that was definitely a very big selling point, specifically for a couple of our customers.
That's great. Okay, so new customers, what'd you do?
The big thing we started to do was just focus digitally, just trying to get out in front of get our name, get our parts out in front of potential customers. One of the biggest things that we did was a focus on posting LinkedIn specifically. We do somewhat Facebook, Instagram, but it's not anything spectacular. It's one of those, we need to do that, but next thing you know, you got 8 quotes or this or that to do, and it just kind of gets thrown to the back burner.
So LinkedIn, how often did you post?
Typically once a week. And we also utilize that to find the right people at the customers we were targeting, to try to get in front of them, message them, and use that to at least know who to direct or to put as a contact when sending direct mail or maybe cold calls. And that's that was a big step for us.
And you started doing that in 2016, 2017?
Yeah, late 2016, we started to do that.
You definitely, you were working it when nobody else really was, because LinkedIn is incredible as a resource for finding both companies, but like what you said, the right people in the companies.
Yeah, and I always remember early 2017 going to a seminar in Cleveland, and the presentation was kind of, I believe it was, I think it was just giving data, but it was saying about like using online, and a guy he kept arguing. He's like, it was a whole conversation about like he had a point to prove that it wasn't working, and I just sat in the back and I figured I don't need to say anything, but I just was amazed because it's like, even if it works once, it's not costing you anything. And typically in our line of work, if you get one customer, that's worth a lot because you're going to get more and more work from that customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what's your definition of digital sales and marketing?
It's a good question. Really just being present on the computer, email and social media and that kind of thing. Obviously the bigger picture of the digital, that in a perfect world, if we had the time and the videos and all of that being able to do, maybe even especially now as we go through the COVID-19 crisis, potentially digital tours and those types of things. That's all out there. I mean, it's not something we've utilized yet, but it's definitely something I see as being a big thing for shops that are trying to advertise digitally.
Yeah. Did you upgrade your website at all? Is
Yes,
that part of your digital strategy?
We actually did that in late 2015. We put out a website, and it was kind of loosely based off of what we had before, but just kind of modernized. And then in middle to late of 2018, we went through and revitalized it again, and really to be more of like who we are. And then we just last month redid our website again, including the addition of the quoting through paperless parts.
The 2015, 2018, 2020, you've made investments in your website. What, if you don't mind sharing, what money did you spend in each of those years on your website? Just for those.
Yeah, not a whole lot in relative terms.
Well, that's why I appreciate if you share the number, because I think people think a website upgrade costs a lot of money, and that's
No, I mean, I think all three up the 2018 was relatively cheap because we already had the page there, and it was just kind of modifying things, certain areas, and redoing different pages. So it was just more of a lot of typing and entering than anything. But the other two were less than $1,500.
less than 1,500.
Yes.
So you're happy with the upgrade to your website, and it costs less than 1,500.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, for a job shop owner, that's not a lot of money, and the website is your storefront. People aren't walking in your door today; they're looking at your website, and that's it's. I think it's got to be up to date.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, for I don't care what you're doing. The first thing you do, if I get somebody gives me a perfect cold call, the first thing I'm going to do, maybe even while I'm on the phone, I'm going to go to Google and Google their company.
Yep.
So if I come to an outdated website, you really got to make up for whatever you're selling. It's really got to blow me away to compensate for the lack of it's 2020, people. You know, it's get with the times.
Right, and it doesn't cost that much money. So.
No, absolutely not.
The awards that you and your shop got, did you apply to those to thinking that you would get the PR that would generate new customers? And how did you use those awards in marketing efforts?
Well, initially, to start off, the original first award that we really won was the 2018 Modern Machine Shop's Top Shop Award. For those unfamiliar, Modern Machine Shop runs a Top Shop survey every year, early on in the year, basically looking at your data from the previous year, and it's a benchmarking survey for job shops, and it's very, very, very detailed. And I had went to, that was the conference I was actually at in Cleveland the year before, and I thought I got a copy of the survey, or the information that the data that they had compiled from that survey, and I was like, wow, this is awesome, and I can look at what other shops are doing, and specifically what other top shops are doing, and try to replicate that in my shop the best I can. So as 2017 wound down and 2018 began, I just filled out the survey because I thought that's great information, and you can get a dot on each page to show where you are compared to other shops.
Yeah.
So I filled out that survey in early 2018, and Derek Korn at the time was with Modern Machine Shop, now the editor at Production Machining magazine. He contacted me in early summer, and he said, hey, you know, we selected your shop we would hope that you would participate. We selected you as a top shop. And, you know, from there, we obviously were able to be featured on the cover of Modern Machine Shops magazine in September of 2018, as well as participate in their 2018 Top Shops conference at IMTS.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you did it just for the learning, and it led to other opportunities.
Yeah, our data had really kind of was looking pretty good, so they had
cool.
Contact.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's a competitive award, and to win that, you've got to be doing something special in your shops. So I love that. The session you went to in Cleveland, was that a National Tooling and Machining Association event?
Yes, it was an NTMA event.
So you are obviously a member of the NTMA. Which chapter?
Northwestern Pennsylvania, even though we're in New York, we're a mile from PA. So their chapter is very active. So National said, you're better off to be in their chapter, and so glad we are.
So you participate in the local chapter, but this was a national event in Cleveland. Why well, obviously it led to the Top Shop Award, but why did you join? Why do you stay a member of NTMA? What do you get out of the membership?
Um, the NTMA, I joined it just kind of as I was a young shop owner, just looking for connections, maybe for work, maybe for just to learn. Don't remember exactly when I joined. I just remember initially going to an event. I believe it was actually a blue collar bash, and then eventually playing in a golf outing and getting to meet some of the people in Meadville area that were very, very wise and knowledgeable in the machining industry. So it was awesome to kind of communicate with them and get information from them. And as I started doing that, it became going to more and more events. The local, like I said, the local Northwestern PA chapter is very active. They're typically having a different event almost every month of the year. And
Wow.
a lot of it is just this morning they had a webinar on the CARES Act and what it meant for manufacturers.
Yeah.
So just so much knowledge that they're turning out to their members.
You're going to stay a member.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a leadership role in the chapter?
Yeah, I just this year became was put on the board of directors for the Northwestern chapter.
Why did you decide to up the ante and put in unpaid volunteer time, essentially? Why is that worthwhile?
Because of what the NTMA is doing for the presence of manufacturing, just the image of manufacturing, just constant promotion in schools and national media, local media, everything they're doing, and then as educating, the NTMAU is a phenomenal tool for shops to be able to have their employees be trained in really a low cost training while they're still working. So just so many benefits that they offer to be able to continue to kind of help our chapter continue to offer those benefits and continue to be the star chapter for however many years. I don't know how many years in a row that Northwestern PA has been the star chapter of the NTMA.
Well, you mentioned earlier part of your purpose is giving back to community. In a sense, the local chapter is in the NTMA is your community too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you belong to any other organizations?
Yeah, I'm actually a member of the PMPA, which is the Precision Machines Product Association.
Okay.
Joined that about the same time I did the NTMA. I think I kind of joined them both and thought, well, let's see which one I like more and then give up on the other one. And that was 4 or 5 years ago. So guess I never gave up on either one.
So you must find value there as well. Why? What sort of value do they provide?
Well, one of the PMPA is a lot of their members seem to be a lot more similar to us in terms of what their products are, what they're doing in their shops as being production machined, a lot of turn machine product, high quantity, whereas like the NTMA was kind of a lower quantity type tooling type of thing. But one of the big benefits for me that I've seen of the PMPA is their listservs. And
what is a listserv?
Yeah, what those are is it's like an email discussion that's topical, and you can subscribe to them. And if there's different topics, one I know that I'm subscribed to the CEO listserv, the HR listserv, the technical listserv, a couple other. But basically, if you have a question for that specific listserv, you fire it out there, and everybody gets an email that's, hey, I'm looking to do this, or I'm having this problem. What's the recommendation, or what do you guys think? And there's all these members that have all these years of expertise and knowledge. They're able to reply to that email and say, hey, back in 1985, we had this part that sounds like what you're working on, or hey, we're having the same problem in our shop and we did this with that employee, or those types of things. And and just that instantaneous ability to kind of consult with your or with your peers is amazing.
Do they archive the conversation so you can look at, before you even maybe fire off an email, you can see if it's already been answered?
Yeah, they archive them on their websites, and you're able to go in and from my understanding, it's been a while since I've actually looked up one on their archives, but you can search certain words and be able to find any of those keywords or find conversations regarding that in the past.
So for someone like yourself, you're learning from the experience of others. Like, it's almost, if you want to say, the tribal knowledge of the machining community, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm getting the sense you think that the NTMA and the PMPA would complement each other because you still belong to both.
Oh yeah, they absolutely do.
That's great. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today, Andy. It brings back memories when I was a new shop owner and I was figuring stuff out and plowing through walls that I didn't know were walls at the time. So it's fun to go back and think of those days, and they were, looking back, they were a lot of fun times, although they were hard times as well. So I really can appreciate the journey you're on right now, and it sounds like you're having fun doing it. Really think that the last comments here about the NTMA and the PMPA, maybe folks who have been thinking about joining those, you've maybe given them a nudge to do so. And someone who's thinking, okay, this is May of 2020, I need to find some new business, digital sales and marketing, get on the social media platforms, upgrade your website. You just don't have the option now of face-to-face time. So we've got to change the way we work with prospects. And even though you're a small shop, you're doing it, it's effective, and you can show business that you've gained directly from it. So I thank you for being willing to share that. Did we miss anything?
No, I think we touched on a lot of bases.
Yeah, this has been a great conversation. Where can people find you in Ripley Machine?
Well, as you might know, we have a website and we have a LinkedIn profile. Our website is www.ripley-machine.com.
Mm-hmm.
I encourage you to go on there. We have a quoting platform right on there that you can fill out a form and get direct, upload your prints right there, upload your solid file so we can get you a quote back almost immediately. Also, I encourage you to look me up on LinkedIn and add me and strike up a conversation.
Well, I appreciate you being open to doing that, and thinking about it, this would be a great way for somebody maybe who's not real familiar with LinkedIn. Okay, here's somebody who wants to connect with you, to link with you, and it's a entry into digital media. Well, folks, I hope you are as jazzed as I am after listening to this podcast. Andy shared such a great story, and I think so many of the details are relevant to small shop owners. Perhaps you think about your own situation. You probably have a loyal customer base who will support you while you continue to improve your business, whether it's bringing in an ISO certification or a new type of equipment. There's so many ways to improve your business. And the super thing is that you don't have to do all of them. Don't get overwhelmed. Just pick one and start there. And get your team involved, get a win under your belt, feed on that success, and then promote it digitally. So that's it for today. Thanks for making us a part of it. Until next time, keep those spindles turning, those lasers cutting, and those websites humming. Have a wonderful day.